It's localization generally is an investment that you don't think about making at the beginning of your journey. It's something that comes later, but I think it's worth it to think about it at the very beginning, make a smaller investment to keep things tidy and streamlined from day one, and it's going to pay off in the long run.
Hello and welcome to the Multilingual Content Podcast, where experts discuss international content management, translation, and global communication. I'm Caterina from Undertow, and today, alongside our founder Nicola Calabrese, we are excited to bring you an insightful interview with Francesca Sorrentino, the Localization Director at Phrase. In this discussion, we will explore the complexities of managing multilingual products and how translation agencies can assist startups navigating this challenge. We hope you enjoy this amazing conversation.
Hi, Francesca, and welcome back to the Multilingual Content Podcast. How are you today?
I'm very good, Nicola. Thank you for having me again.
We had the first part a couple of weeks ago. We discussed the relationship with translation agencies and, let's say, end clients, startups. And in this second part, we're going to delve into the complexities of managing multilingual products and what might be things that are underestimated by startups and how a translation agency might help in those cases. Before we jump into the topic, would you mind introducing yourself a little bit in case somebody is catching up just on part two?
Sure. So my name is Francesca Sorrentino. I'm currently a localization director at Phrase, managing their own localization efforts. So Phrase, for those who don't know, the product is a translation management tool. So it's very interesting for me to be part of this project and explore localization from the inside. How did I get here? I started in localization about 15 years ago. I started as a translator for video games, and I was an in-house translator at a video game company. And for a few years, I worked on the client side in a video game company. From translation, I went into project management and then into program management. And I started working on the vendor side. So I also worked in an agency for a few years. And in the last 4 years, I've been freelancing and working on several different projects, translating, organizing conferences, and collaborating with Phrase.
Let's start from, let's say, the beginning. If you can elaborate on the complexities involved in coordinating multiple languages and regions for an international product.
Sure. The first thing I would like to mention is that the very concept of multiple languages and multiple regions, it's not the same thing. In the same region, maybe you speak different languages, or the same language is spoken across different regions. You really need translation and localization expertise if you want to launch your product internationally. And a translation agency is not only going to help you with the text and the translations themselves, they're also going to help with certain market expertise because they're usually local to the territories that you want to penetrate with your product. And obviously, it also depends on the amount of languages and amount of regions or territories that you want to get into. Keep in mind that the more they are, the more help you're probably going to need because the effort is going to be a bit higher. And also, it's very useful to work with translation agencies because thanks to their expertise, they're going to take care of translation-specific tasks that you probably don't even know about or your teams don't know about, and they are experts in.
Yeah, because there's one thing that I notice sometimes, that when you, let's say, just one language and you're not doing a lot of content in, let's say, another language, let's say you have all your content in English and you're just doing one international market and not all the content, not a lot, you might be able to manage it internally. And some, let's say, processes that are not very efficient, they might still work. But when you try to scale it up to 2, 3, 4, 10 markets, that's when you're going to start seeing the amount of work multiplying. And really getting out of it. So I wanted to ask you a little bit, like, what do you think startups typically underestimate in terms of resources and expertise required to effectively manage localization in-house?
So based on my experience in startups, localization is handled by someone maybe in the product team who has time, quote unquote. They have time, they can take on a few extra tasks, and they're in charge of localization. Or maybe it's a person that speaks a few languages, and it's assumed that they're going to be keen on handling localization, or they're going to be good and at that. I think what is underestimated is that you need specific skills and specific knowledge that your team doesn't necessarily have, because they are there for a different reason and they have different roles.
Yeah, for example, I'm thinking like managing strings, like you have all the keys maybe in an Excel file, and even if you do it internally or you send it externally to freelancers, and you just have to keep like version control, making sure then you're sending back to the developers the right set of strings, and then they maybe have to implement it like in a sim manually process. Maybe you don't know, but there are software like platforms like Phrase, for example, where you can integrate with GitHub, so you don't need to do like this spreadsheet thing. And these kind of things, maybe it's, I think, one of the areas where translation agencies can advise, at least, because obviously they've been doing this for a while with different clients, that every setup is different, but there are like some patterns that you can recognize and help with this. And what do you think are the risks associated with trying to handle all aspects of localization internally without external support? To try to do everything on your own? What are the risks that you might be there?
The first one I can think of from a localization perspective is that you're going to overlook something important that you are not aware that is important. And that's frequently the case with, for example, legal issues or any cultural aspect from cultures or regions that are not familiar to you. Translation agency they're very trained to spot that kind of issues, and they're going to flag them straight away. And I think the biggest risk is spending extra time doing something that you thought you had under control, and in the end you end up spending more time because of the issues that may arise, because you realize that you don't have the expertise, because it's too late in the process, and simply you don't have the bandwidth to deal with issues, and you might end up, for example, missing an important deadline.
Yeah, and I think like also there's something that I think sometimes might be underestimated is if you have to figure everything out on your own, like you've never done it before, so you might still get a good result, but it will take you longer, and you will maybe find things out last minute. Something, for example, I'm a big fan of not like going straight and translating everything all together. It makes sense to not do everything, like to start small and then scale up. But when you start small, what you choose to localize, it might make sense to have somebody that has already done that advise you like some beats of the experience that you might underestimate or just forgetting about it. You mentioned legal, for example. Sometimes like you translate your website, you make a micro website, and then you realize when you're about to launch it that actually the privacy page has not been translated yet. So you have to add it last minute, and that puts a lot of pressure and frenzy on a delivery that otherwise would have been fairly straightforward. These kind of things, and when you have a lot of moving pieces, if you're going into several markets at once, you have a lot to keep track of. But just doing it again for the first time, you have no idea where to start from and what to choose from. You're definitely going to miss something, almost inevitable. So I think that, there might be something else.
Yeah. And I'm also, one thing that comes to mind, and I think it happened many times before to many companies, depending on the product that you have, maybe you want to launch something, a feature or a character in a video game, something that is going to be problematic in a certain region or in a certain culture, and an external agency with local people, local experts, they're going to help you with that too, and they're going to make sure that you don't get into big legal issues.
Yeah, that's right. Like big legal issues, or maybe you spend time like localizing a feature that is not really needed or not really compatible in that market. If you do, I don't know, something based on Venmo in Europe, it's not like a common payment method. So you're probably going to waste time there. So this kind of things, it's always helpful to at least speak with somebody in market. If you do have internally the resources, obviously that's helpful. But if you don't, a translation agency can be helpful with that. How do you think like partnering with a trusted translation agency alleviate the burden of managing localization for startups? So like this, as we said, like there's a lot of different parts. Which parts I think a translation agency can help with?
Yeah. The advantage of working with a translation agency is that they have easy access, let's say, to the most important skills and expertise that you need in the translation world. So you don't have to figure out how to do things, as you, Nicola, were saying. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. The wheel has been there for a while, and the translation agency, they're gonna have access to it, and it's gonna make the whole process more cost effective for you, because as we say, they have easy access. They have a pool of resources that they can use, and it's just going to be very easy for them to provide a service to you. And also they have access to tools that you might not even know they exist. As we also were saying, platforms that can do translation but can also connect to your GitLab repository. They use translation memories, and that's very useful when you have to keep consistency with brand names, with product names, with translations that have been done in the past, and you also want to keep consistency across languages. So make sure that the same approach is used for all languages. And as we were also mentioning earlier, it's really valuable that a translation agency can help you avoid issues and ultimately also avoid bugs that your team will have to look into and solve maybe at the very last minute before launch.
Yeah, and if I might add on the technology side, there's always a lot of like new technology. Like now, obviously, everything is AI, but there's a lot of software and solutions that a translation agency maybe has already implemented in other instances, and you don't have to like scramble and figure out how do we do this, and we have to think it from scratch. And maybe like the translation agency already has some technology solution that they've been using for a while, but they've already tested in different cases. Again, it will speed things up in implementing them and implement it in a more efficient way as well, like more effective, as you said. Another thing that I wanted to, obviously we touched about on this a little bit earlier, but it's like the scaling up part. Like you can start small, that's great. Then you say, this is going well, let's scale up. So what's like, how does working with a translation agency enable startups to scale their localization efforts more efficiently?
I think the key is in the fact that the translation agency has a pool or has a portfolio of services that is, let's say, is there and is there for every customer. And you might decide to use them or not. They are available for you. And when you decide to scale up, they're going to be able to provide, I don't know, the extra resources that are needed or the extra service that is needed. For example, if from translation, you also want to do localization testing, they're going to be able to help you with that. You want to do market research, they're going to be able to help you with that. You want to optimize your content, your website content for search engines, they're going to be able to help you with that. Let's say, yeah, it's a set of services that are available for you that you might need or not, but are very easy to add to your workflow.
Yeah, because I was thinking like if you were to try and do it internally, every single time you want to add, let's say, a new service line, you're literally creating a new service line. So you have to set up all the processes, all the technology, all the standards and procedures around this. Obviously, it's going to be really time consuming. And again, if you haven't done it before, you will have to figure things out, make a lot of mistakes along the way. And maybe you don't want to do that. Like, I mean, especially if that's not your job, like if you're working in product and not in localization, maybe you don't want to spend like all your days trying to figure out how to do things in localization because you already have like a lot of other stuff in product to figure out how to do it. When you say like adding new services, do you think it applies also to, let's say, you want to add new markets, or when you say like help to scale up quicker with new markets as well? Or because you mentioned services already.
I mean, obviously, it depends on the partner that you choose. And Maybe some partners are specialized also in market research, in SEO, search engine optimizations, and maybe some others are not. But in any case, they're going to be able to advise you. And if they're not offering the service, they're going to be able to recommend someone who does. But they do have the full overview on what a localization process means.
And I think even if they don't provide it directly, you can advise on like realistic expectations, like on timings and feasibility of some of the ideas, or maybe how long it will take to do something. I have another question about, it's kind of like connected to this one. Like, what role does expertise and specialized knowledge play in the success of a localization program? And how does a translation agency provide this expertise?
Yeah, I think expertise in localization and specialized knowledge is going to help you. First of all, it's going to help you streamline the localization process and make it cost effective. And it's going to prevent issues that maybe you don't have the bandwidth to solve at the end of the process. Put very simply, you work with the localization agency, there are going to be no issues or fewer issues than compared to no localization agency. For me, it's a lot about minimizing the risk that you run when you want to do localization and you want to do it on your own and you need an expert partner to do that.
As I said before, like there's so many things to take into account when entering international markets. As you said, like you might have the same language in different regions. It needs to be applied differently. And only from a linguistic and cultural point of view, there might be legal requirements and other things that you actually have to keep an eye on. And that's maybe more even like in your core competencies and skills. And then you have to focus on that. On the localization side of things, it will be just more things that stack up, like even like technical side. We didn't go into that, but like even looking at how the software is structured, how does it take into account for, let's say, languages that are not English, so that they need different fonts, they need different direction, maybe they go right to left rather than left to right, and use of variables. Before we start recording, we were discussing a little bit like reusable strings and concatenation of strings and this kind of things. It's all things that maybe you don't want to have. I mean, it's good to know, but if you don't know, you don't know. Like you're not going to even look out for these things and you'll figure it out. Find them out like only when you already launched the product and you see that something's broken or something is not working.
Correct. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that episode about the technical localization and internationalization.
We're gonna do an episode on that because it's a bit of it's quite technical, but it is important to keep in mind because sometimes it saves a lot of headaches, to be honest. Like internationalization done properly, it saves time and like throughout the process, especially the more languages you're localizing into. If you prepare software like better at the beginning, because otherwise it's what you fix once before you start localization is one. If you have to fix it afterwards, you have like 10, 20 markets, like 10, 20 times you have to fix the issue and you might be even pressed for time. So it's not ideal.
Not ideal and not fun.
No, I mean, no, it's absolutely not fun to do that. And again, like I think one of the themes that we mentioned several times throughout this episode is like minimizing risk, like some risk management as much as possible. There's always going to be issues coming up and things unplanned. Foresee them as much as possible and reduce them at the start. It will be great. I was thinking if there's like something else like that you will recommend thinking, especially again, keeping in mind maybe for startups and that they haven't like localized before, they're starting the international journey out. If there's any further advice that you would like to give them or something that we didn't discuss, but you think it will be worth mentioning, especially regarding the relationship translation agency and the startup.
Yeah, I think we discussed the topic pretty thoroughly. What I have seen in my experience in localization over the years is that when you specialize in something, and let's say when you split tasks and you work with specialists, things work better and they're more streamlined. You save on costs. Ultimately, you achieve better quality. And it's localization generally is an investment that you don't think about making at the beginning of your journey. It's something that comes later, but I think it's worth it to think about it at the very beginning, make a smaller investment to keep things tidy and streamlined from day one, and it's going to pay off in the long run.
Yeah, I completely agree. Let's say from the very start, like a global mindset, in the sense that you already know, like you could possibly, even if you're not doing it today, you might be in a couple of years, maybe start going in different countries. So if you have already that in mind in everything that you do, from the way you structure your company, your department, or the way you structure your software, that definitely helps down the line because it makes things easier afterwards. Because otherwise having to rework, it's not that great. Okay. If you don't have anything else you think it will be worth mentioning about the relationship between startup and translation agency, I think we can wrap up this episode. It was really nice to have you back. It was a really interesting conversation.
Thank you. I'm always very happy to discuss anything related to localization.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us today. The Multilingual Content Podcast is powered by Undertow. We help companies translate their content into results. Get in touch if you want to know more. And if you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new episode. See you next time.